My parents gave my inheritance to my brother without telling me. So I bought their house, raised their rent, and evicted them with the same lawyer they hired. I'm a 31-year-old guy, and I've always been the family afterthought. Not the black sheep exactly, more like background noise. The kind of kid who got decent grades, never caused trouble, and quietly blended into the wallpaper while my younger brother Luke soaked up every spotlight in the house. Luke was 2 years younger, but 10 times louder. When he got a B+, it was framed on the fridge like a masterpiece. When I got straight A's, my dad would shrug and say, "That's expected from you." I remember once in high school, I got into the top 5% of my class and told my mom over dinner. She smiled briefly, then immediately turned to Luke and asked how his soccer practice went. I wasn't even surprised. Our family wasn't rich, but somehow there was always money when Luke needed something. Guitar lessons. Summer robotics camp, his car. Later, college tuition, rent, and even seed money for the startup he ran straight into the ground. Meanwhile, I worked at a diner during my senior year just to afford my textbooks. When I asked for a small loan to cover a laptop for school, Dad said, "You're responsible. You'll figure it out." I did. I always did. And for years, I told myself it didn't matter. That being self-made was better than being babied. But the cracks started showing around family dinners, when relatives would say, "Luke's the one with potential," or "Your parents must be so proud of him." I'd nod, force a smile, and quietly swallow whatever bitterness rose up. What hurt most wasn't even the favoritism. It was the way my silence made it easier for them to forget I was ever there. Like the more I succeeded on my own, the more invisible I became, and I hadn't even seen the real betrayal yet. I used to cling to one line my dad repeated over the years, almost like a prayer. "We'll make it right someday." Whenever money or favoritism came up, he'd say it with that calm authority that made me want to believe him. The promise was simple. When the time came, Luke and I would each get an equal share of the family estate, including the old house that once belonged to our grandparents. That house wasn't just property, it was history. It was where my grandfather taught me how to fix a leaky faucet, where my grandmother used to hum old jazz tunes while cooking. I always imagined one day bringing my own kids there, keeping that legacy alive. That thought made all the quiet neglect easier to live with, so I stayed silent. I kept my distance but still visited on birthdays, bringing gifts and pretending everything was fine. Luke, on the other hand, stayed close, mostly because he needed them. His business ventures failed one after another, but somehow my parents always found just enough to bail him out. "He's just figuring things out," Mom would say. "He'll get there." I remember once during a family dinner, I casually mentioned that I'd finally paid off my student loans. Dad smiled faintly, then turned to Luke. "You hear that, son? Your brother's doing well, you should ask him for advice." Luke laughed it off. But later, Mom told me I shouldn't rub my success in his face. Still, I held on to that promise, equal shares, equal love someday. It was naive, but part of me needed to believe that fairness existed, even if it was delayed. I didn't know that someday had already come and gone without anyone telling me. I turned 30 that year, old enough to stop waiting for promises, young enough to still believe in them. I'd been saving for years, hoping to finally buy a small apartment in the city. I spent nights scrolling through listings, comparing prices, imagining what life might feel like if I finally had something that was mine. One afternoon, while running property searches, I typed in my parents' address out of curiosity, just to see what the market value might be. When the page loaded, I felt my stomach drop. The house, the one that was supposed to belong to both of us, wasn't under my parents' names anymore. It was listed solely under Luke's, transferred nearly 9 months ago. I stared at the screen for a full minute, thinking maybe I'd misread it. I checked again. Same result. Same name, same date. That quiet promise of "we'll make it right someday" had vanished in legal ink. That evening, I drove straight to their house, heart pounding. Mom opened the door, smiling until she saw my face. "What's wrong, honey?" she asked. I didn't waste time. "When were you planning to tell me the house is under Luke's name?" The silence that followed was unbearable. Dad finally said, "It's still in the family. Don't make a scene." Mom chimed in. "Luke just needed stability. You're doing fine. You don't need it." Something inside me cracked. I wasn't even angry yet, just hollow. Years of quiet sacrifice, of believing I'd been patient for a reason, and it had all led to this. Not fairness, not love, just convenience. I didn't shout or argue. I simply said, "Thanks for making it clear where I stand," and walked out. That was the moment I realized their version of love was never unconditional. It was transactional, just like the deed. I thought walking away would be the hardest part. I was wrong. The real betrayal came later, quietly, insidiously, through whispers and phone calls I wasn't part of. Within a week, I started noticing the shift. A cousin unfollowed me on social media. My aunt, who once praised my independence, left a passive-aggressive comment on an old photo. Some people forget where they came from. Then I saw it, Luke's post. A wide grin in front of the house, arms stretched like he'd conquered something. Captioned, "My new place. Couldn't have done it without Mom and Dad believing in me." Hundreds of likes, dozens of comments congratulating him. I stared at that photo for a long time, feeling something boil beneath my skin. No mention of the deal being secret. No mention of the brother who was cut out of it entirely. Just smiles, lies, and curated praise. Then came the guilt calls. My mother's voice on the other end, soft but sharp. "We did what was best for everyone, sweetie. You always said you didn't need help." When I didn't respond, she sighed like I was the disappointment. "Why are you making this harder than it has to be?" Friends tried to mediate. "Maybe let it go, man. It's just a house." But it wasn't. That house held the scent of my grandfather's pipe tobacco, the echo of his laugh, the creak of the floorboard he never got around to fixing. It was the place he looked me in the eye when I was 12 and said, "One day this will belong to you and your brother, together." That memory didn't fade. It sharpened. They thought I'd sulk and move on, but they didn't realize something far more dangerous was forming inside me. Resolve. I blocked their numbers the next morning, deleted the group chats, muted every cousin, aunt, and family friend who had chimed in with their opinions. If I was going to be the villain in their story, I'd do it in silence. I packed my things and moved to a city 3 hours away. No goodbyes, no explanations, just a clean slate. I buried myself in work. 12-hour days, certifications, side gigs, investing everything I could into stocks, real estate, and my sanity. Every dollar I made felt like a brick in a wall I was building between myself and the people who raised me. 3 years passed. On paper, I was thriving. I was pulling in 6 figures, owned 2 rental properties, and had a financial advisor who called me one of his sharpest clients. But success, as shiny as it looked, didn't erase the ache. It only magnified the truth. I had done everything right, and still, it had never been enough for them. Then one Saturday afternoon, I got a message from Mr. Wilkins, an old neighbor from back home. "Just checking in. Heard you're doing well. House isn't the same without your grandpa." And then casually, like he didn't just drop a bomb, "Place looks rough these days." Luke's let it go. Yard's dead, gutters falling off. Heard there's talk of foreclosure. I stared at the message, heart pounding. He didn't know what that house meant to me, or maybe he did. Either way, it was like hearing that someone had carved up your childhood and left the pieces to rot. I dug deeper. A few late-night searches, some public records, and there it was. Luke had defaulted on multiple loans. The house was barely holding on. My parents were struggling to keep up with payments. They'd given him everything. And now they were drowning in it. It started like most nights. I couldn't sleep. So I opened my laptop, sipping coffee at 1 a.m., and typed in the old address on a real estate site. I wasn't expecting anything. Just morbid curiosity. Then I saw it. "For sale, 3-bed, 2-bath, needs TLC, motivated seller." I froze. My childhood home, our home, listed like it was just another crumbling asset. There was no mention of the history inside those walls. No mention of the memories or the betrayal sealed into its foundation. Just a price tag, and a desperate one at that. Digging further, I found it wasn't just a listing. It was a lifeline. Luke was drowning in debt and trying to sell the house to stay afloat. The irony? My parents were still living there. They probably didn't even know the sale was happening. I could have looked away. I could have closed the tab and let it go. But something inside me lit up. Not rage, not even revenge. Just a quiet sense of balance, finally tipping back in my direction. The next day, I made a call. Not to a new lawyer. To the lawyer. The same one who had handled the transfer that cut me out of the deed. When the receptionist asked for my name, I gave it slowly, waiting to hear a flicker of recognition. None came. When I met the man in person, he glanced at me like I was just another client. I let him finish his pitch, then leaned in with a smile. I'd like to purchase this property. Discreetly, no public records under my name. He nodded, not realizing the weight of what he'd just agreed to. I left his office feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Not happiness, not even justice, control, and I was just getting started. The purchase went through within a month. I used a shell company I'd set up years ago for real estate investments. Clean, legal, untraceable. The house was undervalued, listed well below market due to its condition and Luke's desperation. I didn't even have to negotiate. The man who once took everything from me was now practically giving it away. Neither Luke nor my parents knew who bought it. The sale closed through a third-party agent, and the title went directly to my company. Just another anonymous investor on paper. I didn't want revenge that screamed. I wanted a quiet shift of power. A week later, I visited the house. Not to claim it, just to see it. The front porch still creaked the same way it did when I was 10. The oak tree in the yard had lost a few branches, but its trunk stood tall, scarred but unbroken. My old bedroom window was cracked at the corner, its curtain still fluttering like it used to on windy nights. The place looked smaller than I remembered, but the weight in my chest was heavier than ever. I didn't move in. That would have been too easy. Instead, I instructed my lawyer to draft a standard lease agreement. Fair market rent, routine inspection clauses, late fee penalties. A business deal. Nothing more. My parents signed it within days. Relieved, grateful, oblivious. We got lucky, my mother said on the phone to Luke, not knowing I was listening through a forwarded voicemail. Could have been someone heartless. I stood in the parking lot outside the law office, holding the signed lease, and I whispered to myself, low and sharp, "You really did." They thought the story had ended with them on top, but the first page of my chapter had just been written. For the first few months, they paid on time, quietly, no complaints, no requests. Just rent checks deposited into an account that carried no trace of me. I almost forgot they were there. Almost. But then Luke started slipping. First, it was a 5-day delay. Then 10, then no payment at all. The excuse came in a polite email forwarded to my lawyer. "We're experiencing some temporary business setbacks. Should be resolved soon." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. My lawyer sent the default notice, citing late fees and interest accrual. Professional, impersonal, exactly how they once treated me. A week later, another email arrived, this time from my mother. It was longer, softer. "We're doing our best. We're just not as young as we used to be. Please ask the owner to reconsider." She had no idea I was reading her words. She still didn't know that the landlord she was pleading with was her own son. I instructed my attorney to respond with standard legal language. Unfortunately, rent will now be adjusted to match market value in the area. A 20% increase, not extortion, just business. That month, I drove by the house again. Watched my father struggle to lift bags of mulch from the trunk of his car. My mother sweeping the porch in the same house she once said I didn't need, and I'll admit it, there was a moment. A flicker of guilt. They were older now, tired, fragile. But then I remembered every time they told me to stop being dramatic. Every time they had poured into Luke and let me sink, this wasn't revenge. This was balance, but balance has a way of shifting when one side keeps taking, and soon, they were about to find out what happens when the scale tips too far. It was almost midnight when the email came. I was wrapping up some reports, the apartment quiet except for the hum of my desk fan. My phone buzzed with a notification from my lawyer's secure inbox. Subject line, "Tenant correspondence urgent." I clicked it open. The message was from my mother. "Please. We're going to lose the house. Luke's business failed. We're behind on everything. We can't afford the new rent. I know the landlord doesn't know us, but if you could just reach out on our behalf. You're the only one we have left. Please, talk to him." She signed it. "Love you always, Mom." I sat there staring at those words, my eyes burning. Not from the screen, but from everything those sentences didn't say. There was no "we're sorry." No, we should have treated you better. Just a quiet desperation disguised as love, weaponized through guilt. She didn't even know she was begging her own son for mercy. And maybe that was the part that broke me. Because in all those years, every birthday missed, every milestone I achieved alone, they never reached out. Not to ask how I was, not to make it right. Only now, when the walls were closing in, did I matter again. Tears slipped down my face, slow and quiet. But they weren't from sadness. They were from clarity. They had made their choice the moment they handed the house to Luke behind my back. The moment they called me ungrateful for asking why. The moment they turned me into the villain to justify their guilt. And now? They weren't reaching out to reconnect. They were reaching out to survive. I wiped my face, shut the email, and leaned back in my chair. They chose Luke. Now they could live with that choice. 3 months. That's how long they went without paying. 3 months of silence, of ignored warnings, of automated notices sent from my company's legal team. I gave them every legal grace period, every required reminder. And then I gave the green light. My lawyer, the same man who once helped erase me from that deed, drafted the eviction notice. I didn't even have to say the words. The irony dripped from every line of that paper like poison laced with justice. 10 days to vacate. The notice was hand-delivered. The next day, I got a text from an unknown number. Just one line. "How could you let this happen?" I didn't reply. Luke was the first to disappear. No surprise there. He packed a duffel bag and bolted the minute the notice landed. No goodbyes, no explanation, just vanished. Classic Luke. Leaving the mess for everyone else to clean up. My parents called the law office 3 times in a panic. My lawyer recorded every voicemail. "We're old," my mother cried. "We have nowhere else to go," my father begged, and still, no apology. No acknowledgement. Just desperation wrapped in entitlement. I listened to the voicemails once, just once. Then I sent the final response through legal channels. Tenant has 10 days to vacate the premises. No further extensions. On the 8th day, I drove by the house. I parked across the street, out of sight. Watched as my parents loaded cardboard boxes into a borrowed van. The porch light flickered behind them. The wind rustled the dead leaves in the yard. They looked smaller than I remembered. Not because they were aging, because for the first time I was no longer beneath them. They didn't see me, but I saw them. And for the first time in my life, I felt seen, not by them, by life itself. A week after they left, I went back, alone. No keys jingling with anticipation, no suitcase in the trunk. Just me, a set of gloves, and a quiet need to see. The front door creaked open like it recognized me. Dust floated in the air, catching the sun through dirty windows. The carpet was stained, the walls scuffed. And yet, somehow, it still smelled like childhood. That faint trace of old wood, aging wallpaper, and memories that refused to die. I walked through each room slowly. My old bedroom was empty except for the outline of where my bed used to sit. The hallway had one crooked frame still hanging, our last family photo before Luke's high school graduation. I didn't touch it, just stared. The edges of the photo were curling, like even the past wanted to let go. And I stood there, in the house they stole from me, and felt something I didn't expect. Not satisfaction, not revenge, grief, because even justice, when it comes late, carries weight. I could have sold the place, flipped it, and made a quick profit. But instead I hired a local contractor. Quiet, skilled, no questions asked. I told him I wanted it livable again. Fresh paint, fixed windows, a new porch railing. 6 months later, a young couple with a toddler signed a lease. First-time renters, kind eyes, the kind of family who looked excited to build something. I stood across the street that day, watching the dad lift a box labeled baby clothes up the steps. The mom laughed at something he said, and all I could think was, at least now, someone deserving will call this place home. Not because of a bloodline, but because they earned it. They taught me what home isn't. It's not walls. It's not blood. It's not the memories hung crooked on the hallway walls or the voices that once filled the kitchen. It's respect. And when that's gone, the house becomes just bricks and betrayal. After the renovation, I visited less and less. The young family that moved in sent me thank you notes every few months, simple, handwritten messages about their toddler's first steps on the new hardwood, or how much they loved the light that filled the living room each morning. Notes filled with gratitude. with warmth, with value. Meanwhile, my parents moved in with distant cousins in another town. I heard through a secondhand source that they sold off most of their belongings. Pride doesn't go far when your bank account's empty. Luke? Last I checked, he'd disappeared into a blur of debt and half-baked business ideas in another state. Social media silent. No updates. No pictures. Just gone. And me? I'm good. Really good. The bank account's full. The company's growing. And more importantly, my mind is quiet. Some nights I drive by the old house. I don't go in anymore. I just stand at the edge of the sidewalk, look at the porch light glowing warm in the evening haze, and let the silence speak for me. This was never about revenge. Not really. It was about reclaiming something that had been taken in silence. I lock the mental door behind me now, not out of bitterness, but out of clarity, because the truth is simple. They didn't lose a house, they lost me, and I finally understand. Home isn't where you come from, it's where you're valued. Fade to black.